How's it going, dudes? Welcome back to the worst board game of all time, Tournament 2. We have officially reached the end of the opening round, and 32 of the worst board games from around the world have found themselves eliminated from contention, while our remaining titles all take one step closer to taking home the crown. But which of these games will be moving on and which will be heading home? That's what we're here to find out with the official declaration of the first round results, as well as a little bonus. See, as the games continue to get further and further into the tournament, it becomes ever more important that you know all you need to know about them so that you can be an informed voter. So what we'll also be doing here is clearing up some misconceptions about some of our competitors for the public good. As per usual, I'll be joined virtually by my color commentator, Joshua Jacobs.
Pleasure to be here, Cam. I cannot wait to see which games have already managed to mess up people's brackets.
I'm sure there will be plenty of surprises in store for everyone, so let's go ahead and move on over to the big bracket to see who will be moving on. Let's start off by meeting our winners from the Stink region. Our first matchup will see a clash between two terrifying hosts, the video board game Rap Rat versus James Corden's Carpool Karaoke. These two came into their opening matchups looking to make some statements, with the Rat putting up the first 90% score since Adultery, and James Corden proving that the title of Lost was correct in what appears to be a growing trend in this tournament of blowout victories. Going into this matchup, the crowd will be forced to decide which host they can't stand more, with the Rat bringing some absolutely vile rhymes and mechanics to the fray that he may use to disorient his opponent, while Corden will rely instead on the general idea of his game being so confusing that it leaves his opposition lost again. It's at this point that we'd like to address some misconceptions about our two competitors here, starting with the Rat. People have been whispering that the only reason that this title is in this position is due to the Rat's influence and the possessed aspect. And while those do play a key part, a big portion of the Rat's game comes from the fundamental negatives in his game's design. The gameplay is just rolling the die over and over. The only way that you can win is through luck, and the balance is some of the worst that we have ever seen due to the penalties. Penalties such as stop playing and put your hands on your head for 1 minute in a 10-minute game, return every single piece of your puzzle with 30 seconds left in the round, and miss an amount of turns equal to your age. I recently managed to time that one out, and anyone around the age of 18 will have about 1 minute left to finish their puzzle, while anyone over the age of 25 instantly loses right there. At the same time, there does appear to be a James Corden misconception that the game could only be played through an app that is now discontinued. This is not quite true, as any third-party software that plays music will be able to get the Carpool Karaoke adventure started. However, the fact that the game cannot be played using the components inside of the box is its own special issue that voters will need to consider. Moving on to our next matchup, we'll find an exciting bout between the Vanilla Ice electronic rap game and Campaigns of the Civil War, Vicksburg and Chancellorsville. These two games have made it to the second round on much less dominant wins, with COTCW delivering a sizable but not blowout victory in its match, and the Iceman coming off a rough start in its contested win against Beispielet. Both titles are looking to turn up the heat in this next round to get some momentum behind them going forward, with the Iceman falling back on his abysmal rhymes in hopes of turning the crowd back to him, while Vicksburg and Chancellorsville rely on their low-quality components and rule sets to give them a competitive edge. With the top half of the Stink region covered, let's go ahead and move down to the bottom and meet our next two winners, Dave Ramsey's Act Your Wage versus Ms. Monopoly. This clash between the famed debt destroyer and the self-made investment guru herself is coming off the back of two beatdown victories. Dave Ramsey securing a massive upset in the opener with little effort, and Ms. Monopoly recording the first 90-point performance by a non-number 1 seed in tournament history. This financial fistfight is going to be quite the tough task for Big Dave to overcome, as Ms. Monopoly is in possession of an absolute arsenal of bad decisions that have set the game up well with a terrible foundation. However, the public does seem to be resonating with how the fact that Act Your Wage exists at all is quite the saddening thought. so experts are expecting him to attempt to use this angle to catch Ms. Monopoly off guard and try to snag an early lead. With no misconceptions on what these two have to offer, let's go now to our final matchup of the Stink region. Woman and Man, the classic confrontation versus Monopoly Cheaters Edition. These two titles both swept up their first round contests rather easily, posting convincing wins for their seeding and marching into this second round bout looking to capture a true statement win. Woman and Man has found some success early leaning on its sexism angle to get the job done, and it has worked quite well so far. However, it is going up against a game that is a lot deeper in its mistakes with its mechanics, MCE managing to biff numerous parts of its execution, which has led to the development of its strong offense. We anticipate that Woman and Man is going to stick by its most potent offensive aspect for this upcoming match, but if it can manage to branch out into showcasing how boring it is on top of that, we might have ourselves a much closer contest than first projections show. With the Stink region's second round matches set, let's bring Josh in to talk about the matchups he would like to see take place in the terrible third.
Yeah, Cam, I'm gonna end up going a different route here because I think everybody already knows what matchups I'd like to see take place. Put those bad boys up on the screen and imagine the utter chaos that we would see take place here. An all-time rap battle mixed in with some family drama, you couldn't hope for any better than this. So instead, I'm going to take a look at each of the other games and analyze their chances of shaking things up with a crazy upset. Starting off, let's look at Big Dave. A great first round showing, some real unique cons that help him out here, a good chunk of supporters behind him, and I think he's gonna get killed out there. Look at Ms. Monopoly's performance in that first round and tell me that this isn't a game that can go far. I mean, she's putting up adultery numbers out there. I like Dave, it's great to see him move on, this man is going home. Moving up, let's take a look at COTCW. Now I said upsets earlier, even though this guy is higher seeded than the Iceman, and that's because I think the thriller of Vanilla still might be the favorite here. Sure, he got out to a real slow start, but that was against the Poop Game, a title that you cannot consider a weak opponent after it played its heart out in an incredible performance. Meanwhile, VAC couldn't even crack 70 against tech support, a worthy opponent in its own right, but nowhere near the level of the Poop Game. I think that if COTCW really wants a shot at this next round, it's gonna have to do better than that, because after Vanilla's wake-up call in round 1, he's gonna make sure that he comes out ready to play in every match he's got left. Moving down again, let's take a look at Woman and Man. One of the hottest underdogs from our misogyny region, Woman and Man is looking for a real statement win to show that it is the real deal. And unlike the other two, this one has some real hype behind it with an easy to understand game plan. So you'll find plenty of people willing to give this one a shot, it just depends on if that crowd is going to be big enough to make a difference. Finally, take me up to the very top so that I can see who I think has the best shot at messing my bracket up good, James Gordon. I am quite scared that the Rat might be encountering one of the most white-hot games in the tournament in just round 2. With a near universal hatred for the man on the cover, the carpool karaoke game has a real chance to make it quite far into this tournament if it can manage to get past the wall that is the Rat. But that in and of itself is no small task. Definitely want to keep your eyes on this one going forward. Thank you, Josh, and with the Stink region revealed, we have gotten our first taste of what the second round of the tournament has in store for us. But with 24 winners still left to announce, let's go ahead and move on over to the Stank region and check out the matchups that will be happening here. Starting off in the top half, we find our first matchup of this region, Breaky versus WW84 Wonder Woman card game. Both of these competitors are coming off what you could consider solid victories, with Wonder Woman putting together a good score over Catchmag and Breaky setting a new tournament scoring record with a staggering 97%. Seeing this development, WW84 is going to need to lean hard on its gameplay to maybe not get atomized like Shark Attack, as the current Vegas odds are putting Breaky at a solid 99.9% chance of victory, a perfect opportunity for bettors to get some really good odds if they're looking to throw their money away. But before we can start this match off, we first need to clear up some misconceptions about Breaky, as an investigation into the game by several independent reporters has revealed 3 new details that could influence voters.
1. The broken bits of Bray keys that are left over from the battles are recyclable, which could reduce the amount of them that end up in landfills if players know about and have access to recycle services. 2. Bray Key did have an online element where you could redeem your keys to battle others over the web, giving new life to your keys in the virtual world. This would have meant that you would no longer have to repeatedly buy more every time you ran out. But as this site is no longer supported, this does not impact the current game state. And 3, and most importantly, Bray keys do have a secondary function after being broken, a construction element. Utilizing the key corpses, you can construct various creations by using the broken bit in the middle as a connector, allowing you to slowly put together a structure or several other projects from the dead keys. This means that they did not immediately need to be thrown away or recycled. However, it should be noted that this would require quite the large amount of keys to do properly. Overall, these findings shed some new light on the Bray Key product line that give it the impression of being ever so slightly less wasteful. However, it will be up to the public to decide whether or not these findings will be enough to outweigh the massive issues that still hold Bray Key as one of the tournament favorites. With those out of the way, let's head on to the next matchup, which will see Public Assistance playing Russian Roulette. Both titles secured convincing wins, as Public Assistance managed to get the necessary votes to overturn Brexit, and Russian Roulette pulled off a major upset in the opener, sending The Price is Right home early. Russian Roulette is going to look to use its complete fumbling of the Russian Roulette property, as well as its terrible mechanical ideas to pull off another upset here, but will need to do so against one of the most experienced competitors in the bracket, as Public Assistance has plenty of wins under its belt that have prepared it for these kinds of contests, with its theming and contents continuing to give it a rock-solid skill set that only the toughest games can overcome. Moving down to the bottom half of the Stank region, we find what is likely to be a heated clash: Right or Racist versus Bottle Flip, the board game. These two had quite the opening matchups, with Right or Racist continuing to make the case that it was seated too low with an absolutely dominant upset over Mousetrap easier setup in the opener. But the more interesting story was surprisingly the other match, as going into the opener we had Bottle Flip on upset watch as we were expecting a push from the Mormons that could have given the 3 seed a lot of trouble. Instead, it wound up crushing the Mormon offensive and put forth a convincing victory to help quell the doubts about the game, and giving it some much needed momentum as it goes into a round 2 matchup against the most talked about game in the bracket. Bottle Flip is leaning into its placement in the pointless quadrant of the bracket well, with RPS comparisons aplenty describing it as a waste of money. But Right or Racist is flying high by eliciting a genuinely angry reaction from voters, knowing that if it can control the emotion game, it will have a distinct advantage in the polls. But now it is time to clear up some misconceptions about these titles, starting off with Bottle Flip. The main misconception about this game is that it only comes with the bottle and the target, thereby making it a genuine waste of money. However, the game's main draw are the challenge cards that force you to throw the bottle in more difficult ways in order to earn points, and the decision of whether to attempt the challenges yourself or force an opponent to try them in hopes that they will fail. Whether these cards give the game enough of a purpose to warrant its creation is up for the voters to decide, but they are included in the game. As for Right or Racist, strap yourselves in. The discussion over this game has been tantamount to talking about a cryptid, with rumors swirling around for the game's tone, message, contents, and whether or not the cards are even just made up. So after looking further into it and stumbling across the game in the wild, here's what we've got. Right or Racist is a true-false trivia game that is tasking players to identify whether statements are made up or not, similar to games like Fact or Crap. The theming of the game is meant as a humorous jab at how the nation had continued to split into 2 distinct sides following the 2016 election, as reported by its creator. It is not trying to push any political narrative about stereotypes itself. The facts on the cards mainly refer to laws from other nations or statistics from reports, with the only fabricated information coming on the cards that are meant to be false. As for these true-false cards, they do not exist to determine for a fact which of your friends are actually racists or snowflakes. They are trivia meant to trip people up so that you can humorously call them that if they get it wrong. We at the NBGA felt the need to address this as it seemed like many people wanted this game to be something that it wasn't. A game that is looking to push a particular political agenda like public assistance. Now with all that addressed, you might be wondering why this game qualified for the tournament at all. And while the crass theming definitely played a part in the game getting nominated, the debate cards are the main aspect that got it in. The debate cards remove the trivia aspect from the game and take a whole new approach, presenting controversial political statements from recent topics like US immigration policies or the intent of particular groups and telling you to give your opinion on the subject to the group you are playing with, after which they will respond to your answer. As we have just established that the rest of this game is meant to be a lighthearted true-false trivia romp, this is a tonal whiplash that is going to completely derail the simple nature of the game up to now, in what we would consider one of the worst ideas for a mechanic in a party game ever made. The issues that the game tells you to debate are serious topics that should be handled tactfully in an appropriate setting, so forcing players of what could be completely different backgrounds to just jump into them in a standard social setting where drinks could be involved is just asking for trouble. Heck, the copy that I found was in a bar! So while Rider Racist does not carry the problems that many had hoped that it would, it does still have very unique structural issues within its components that upend the game into some kind of tonal vortex. So don't go thinking that just because this bad boy is down, it's out, as it still definitely has the chance to make some big plays going forward if it can get past this bottle-flipping fiend. And with the lecture out of the way, we can finally approach our final matchup of the Stank region, Strip-Tac-Toe versus the Rock, Paper, Scissors game. Continuing our streak of beatdown victories, Strip-Tac-Toe wasted no time in showing CP that it was not here to be sent home early, with RPS doing the same to the tune of the second highest scoring performance in the opening round. The Diplomat RPS rematch is shaping up to be yet another good one, as Strip-Tac-Toe has been leaning into how stupid of a product it is in general to diversify its skill set, while RPS continues to evade even one decent reason as to why it exists at all. Vegas is currently pointing to RPS as the favorite, but we'll have to wait and see as to whether facing off against its hated rival once again acts as a motivator for the title or weakens it out of fear. With the whole of the Stank region set, let's send it over to Josh to see who he thinks is going to be moving on from these second round matches.
Yeah, Cam, you can go ahead and move Breaky on to the next round for me. Don't get me wrong, Wonder Woman put on a great performance in the opener, but she's cooked, so let's go ahead and move on to the matchups that actually matter. In the RPA matchup, I think we're gonna have a closer match than what we're used to seeing in this tournament, but with my soft spot for our repeat competitors, I think Public Assistance is probably gonna pull this one out. It is going to be pretty hard to top a game with this much experience when you're coming off your one and only win. The next matchup is a lot trickier to predict though. With Rider Race's misconceptions ironed out, it has lost a bit of that mystery factor that gave it an edge, but has impressively managed to recover and leaned into a completely new focus that carries its own weight. You don't see that kind of adaptability in many rookies. Ultimately, I think this matchup is going to come down to how pointless people perceive Bottle Flip to be, as it's kinda locked itself into that as its ride or die aspect. And while that helped it pull off an impressive round 1 win over the Mormons, I think that came more from the disappointing performance that they put on. So I'm going to take Rider Racist here on another big upset as it continues to gain momentum. And finally, I can't be the only one excited to see what our last matchup has in store for us, the RPS Diplomat rematch. This is going to be a match that you do not want to miss, but who do I think is going to come out on top? Personally, I see RPS coming out with this one. Based on what I saw in round 1, it has not returned to peak form, it has gone even further beyond. We have never seen a performance like this out of RPS, and it is clear that it is taking no prisoners this year, least of all from the company that beat it in the final last time. Strip-Tac-Toe has a lot going for it, I get it, but I think revenge is going to be a dish served white hot when these two end up hitting the floor together. With that, we have now met 16 of the 32 victors that will be advancing to the next round. So let's waste no time at taking a look at the remaining titles by heading on down to the bottom half of the bracket, starting with the Stunk region. In our first match here, we will find a clash between Bumps and Grinds and WWB. These two managed to make their way into the second round with a little more trouble than most.
with Bumps and Grinds getting a big win that was relatively small by 1 seed standards, and WWB managing to make it through one of the closer matchups of our opening round. Both games are going to be looking to build off of their opening wins in order to get some momentum flowing for the future, with Bumps and Grinds looking to diversify its focus into its gameplay to be less reliant on the arson angle, and WWB trying to win back public approval as they begin to turn to the same try-hard angle that got it eliminated last year. On to our next battle in this region, we find a bout between What Shall I Be, the exciting game of career girls, and Rat Splatter. Both games had a pretty similar outcome in their matchups, getting some pushback from their opponents, but overall having a pretty easy time working through to the next round. With both games mainly relying on their themes to carry them forward, we are expecting an interesting matchup here for sure, with the career girls expected to use their prior tournament experience to take an edge over the rookie phenom of Rat Splatter. Speaking of, we've had many requests to clarify what Rat Splatter's gameplay consists of on a deeper level, so we'll take some time to clear up any misconceptions there. Trust me, it won't take long. Rat Splatter sees players have piles of rats in front of them that they stack rats of the opposite sex onto in order to breed more rats. This will add one more rat to that pile, and when players draw an anvil card, they can play it on any of the piles to smash all of those rats and collect them for points. This game is not complicated, with the optimal strategy being to breed a rat to make a pile of 3 and then smash it immediately so that no one else can smash it later. If you do this enough times, you will win the game. So with both games carrying crazy themes and simple gameplay, voters are going to have quite the selection to make when this battle begins. Moving away from the top half of the Stunk region, let's mosey on down to the bottom half and meet a battle of repeat competitor favorites, Mr. Bacon's Big Adventure versus the Campaign for North Africa, the Desert War, 1940 to 43. These two experienced combatants got some good wins in round 1, with TCFNA TDW 40 to 43 getting the standard 3-seed victory margin in the opener, and Mr. Bacon securing a hard-fought victory against a tough competitor in Gone with the Wind. Each game's playstyle is well known by this point, Mr. Bacon relying on its terrible gameplay and boring nature alongside the meat feast to give it an extra boost when needed, and North Africa continuing to ride on big game, big length, and the negative appeal of its mechanics to coast to another big win. With both titles having a lot to prove in this tournament, neither is going to want to leave the contest this early. So you can expect a hard-fought match with both leaving everything they have out on the court here. And for our last contest in the Stunk region, we will find the matchup of Minute to Win It versus Joel Harden's Mogul. Both games scored a pretty similar margin of victory in their openers, with Minute to Win It putting together a solid performance against the Crazy Cat Ladies, and the Mogul seeming to struggle against Gone Birding more than the other 2-seeded teams did in their matches. But looking forward, what we have here is simplicity to a fault versus complexity to a fault, with Minute to Win It doing well commandeering its near-pointless distinction into a solid performance, while the Mogul takes its maliciously designed mechanics in for some massive support. It will be interesting to see which side of the coin the voters end up siding with, so this might be a game that you'll want to pay attention to. With the Stunk region winners set, let's bring Josh in to discuss who he thinks has the best chance to move on from this crowd. Yeah, Cam, this is a real interesting region that we've got going on here because a lot of the matchups are going to come down to which simple gameplay and strange theme is the audience going to deem worse between Rat Splat and Korea Girl? Which repeat strengths are going to resonate with the voters harder between Mr. Bacon and North Africa? Which way are the voters going to lean when they have to vote Guy Fieri or Joel Harden? For me, the easiest way to view this is finding which one I would rather play through less. And here's how that goes. Dexterity-based challenges or filling out paperwork, Mogul moves on. Meat-based spin a Candyland or filling out paperwork, North Africa takes the cake there. Moving around a board and trying to land on specific spaces or tossing cards down in a repeating pattern, that's a pretty tough one to pick from, but I think I'd have to go with the Korea Girls there. I know Cam will disagree, but at least I have the option to go for a desperation play in the Splat, not so with the girls. Also, since I'm contractually obligated to look at every matchup, WWB just doesn't have it.
Can somebody please explain to me how this guy got the 8th most votes in the repeat voting? I mean, this guy's story has gone voted out round 2 last year for being a bragger, voted back into the limited returning competitors poll, and then in the same round at the same place in the same region, people are saying that it doesn't even deserve to be here. How did we get here? We're repeating storylines. I mean, with people already voicing the same concerns that got it knocked out in the first place, and with it going up against such a fierce opponent, the only way I can see it moving forward is if the WWB fanbase goes on a media blitz and starts airing commercials to the masses to change their minds. Otherwise, I just don't see it happening.
Well, we do agree on one thing. I do disagree on the Career Girls play. Rat Splatter Sweep incoming. Now, with 3 of the regions set up, we only have 1 group of games left to go. So let's head over now to the Stonk region to meet our final opening round winners. Starting off in the top half, let's meet our first second round matchup in the last region, the Lord of the Rings board game trilogy versus Kong Skull Island game. These two had a much different experience in the opening round, as the LOTR BGT cruised to an easy victory in its 16 seed matchup, while Kong was involved in a knockdown drag-out brawl in the closest match of the entire round. Kong will be going from one tough match to another as it now faces off against the number 1 seed of this region. And while the midpoint restart certainly helped it eke out its first win, the overall gall of the Lord of the Rings games to just repeat the movies beat for beat in not only story but also gameplay is going to be a tough one to beat. And unfortunately for Kong, it is going to be even tougher with this coming clarification. See, many people were commenting about some kind of soft lock within the Lord of the Rings games, and after checking back in the original video, there was a mention of this exact thing. It's a little complicated, so I'll explain. Basically, in the game, you can choose which characters you want to move on your turn, and in the third game, Return of the King, the game does not end until each character finishes their unique storyline. There is also another mechanic in this game where if the Eye of Sauron is facing a character, they are unable to move, so you'll need to move someone else during that turn. Well, if your group decides to rush the Sam and Frodo storyline of heading to Mount Doom first, you can finish their storyline early while also causing the Eye to face all of your other characters based on the order that the cards are drawn. This means that Sam and Frodo cannot move anymore due to their role being complete, and all of the other characters also cannot move due to being looked at by the Eye, completely shutting down the game in the third entry, approximately 6 hours in if playing through the full thing. So on top of the story following the same beats every time, attempting to take these beats on in a creative way could end up completely breaking the game. So be careful when it comes time to play and vote for this title, as it always seems to have another surprise up its sleeve. Moving on to the next match, we'll find a bout between games trying to be something that they're not, the Game of Life Target Edition versus What Do You Meme? In what could have been a rematch of last year's Stunk Region Queasy quarterfinals, we instead see Candyland being upset in the very first round due to underestimating his opponent, leading to the now battle of Not the Game of Life versus Not Funny in the second. Not only did Candyland lose, but it was completely destroyed, with that same sentiment coming from the other game as What Do You Meme dismantled Dad Joke Face Off for its 5th career tournament victory. Target the Game of Life is hoping to build off of this statement win by continuing to use its advertising for Target alongside its false advertising for the Game of Life, mixed in with its boring gameplay to produce a lethal combo. But while beating Candyland is impressive to most, it is not for the meme machine, who has already done that before and now looks to continue his tournament legacy by dispatching of another tough foe, using the same tricks of the trade that have gotten him to where he is today. Moving now to the bottom half of the Stank region, we find our next matchup, 15 Love versus Subway Surfers, the board game. Both of these games made sure to go all out to ensure that they were not going to be the next upset, with Subway Surfers dispatching a decently equipped 39 Clues offensive and 15 Love completely devastating the SimCity card game in an outright beatdown. Whether or not these results are going to indicate a trend for the upcoming match is yet to be seen, as Subway Surfers' complete fumble of the fast-paced nature of the app into a slow-moving luckfest has garnered some momentum on its side. But whether that is going to be enough to counter the wave of support the worst adaptation of tennis has behind it is going to be up for the voters to decide. And going now to the last matchup of the second round, we will meet the final two competitors moving on, the Dr. Laura game versus the 24 DVD board game. Our final match of Dr. Laura versus Jack Bauer comes off the convincing wins that both games managed to walk away with, and now fully rests on which property manages to convince the crowd that it deserves to move on. The Dr. Laura game is mainly relying on its title character to carry the load, both personality-wise from the host herself and from the absolutely wild content that she has managed to stuff her game to the brink with. Meanwhile, Special Agent Jack Bauer is hoping that people catch on to his special skills of nearly impossible challenges combined with poorly integrated hidden role and time-based mechanics, leaving his players as broken and battered as the terrorists that they fight in the game. With the whole of the Stonk region revealed, let's bring Josh in one last time to see who he thinks has the chance to push forward into the terrible third.
Yeah, Cam, I'm gonna go ahead and say that this might be one of the most difficult regions to predict because of how tough it is to determine what the audience is going to hone in on. First, I'm gonna move LOTR forward as, even though people are talking about how it's the weakest #1 seed, I still think it carries enough under its belt to take down Kong pretty easily. After that, it's tough. One of the hottest new competitors taking on one of the hottest returning competitors is going to be a slog of a match for both of these games. But if I need to put my money on a game to win a tough matchup, you won't get many more solid options than the Meme Machine, who is no stranger to tough opponents in its long and decorated career. In fact, you'll remember that the Meme Machine was responsible for the elimination of the original Game of Life in last year's opener. And now going up against the protege of that same game, it's tough to see this beast not having the matchup data to take down the young gun. But Target has managed to already best one legacy competitor, so who's to say it couldn't take down another one for his coach? Up next, 15 Surfers. Stop me if you've heard this one before. 15 Love is a lower ranked opponent that doesn't quite have the same firepower as its higher seeded opposition. This one won't be too close. Wrong. If there's one thing that 15 Love does right, it's pulling off a surprising upset that leaves the crowd stunned. Only this time it has something to build off of with its massive first round victory. Subway Surfers is a heavy hitter, but 15 Love has taken on tougher and come out on top. As Biggs always says, a smart tennis player can beat a strong tennis player 5 games out of 7, and it's about to use those brains to take the edge off of this brute and slip right by him back into the terrible third. Finally, Bauer versus Laura, a matchup that I, if I'm being honest, cannot predict the outcome for. A lot of people are saying that 24 is the boom or bust title for this tournament, and I'm gonna have to agree. This thing could either be headed for a deep run or be going home right now, and it is nearly impossible to tell how the people are feeling about it at any given point in time. What is equally tricky to gauge is the Dr. Laura game, which some people are considering this year's dark horse for a surprising run, and others are lamenting that it sounds like a really fun game. What is going on with these two? If I had to pick one to say that I think it will move on, I'd guess I'd have to take 24 for the sheer gall of including QuickTime events. But if you're tracking these matches to see which ones I get wrong, I'd suggest keeping your eyes right here. I just got a feeling that it could really go either way. And with all 4 regions revealed, we now know all 32 of the games that will be competing in the second round. But while these games are celebrating, let's not forget those who have lost everything by taking a look at our surprising early exits. Of course, we'd be remiss if we didn't bring up the first round exit for one of the most notorious titles on the bracket, Candyland. After putting together a queasy quarterfinal appearance last year, Candyland was unable to secure even a single victory in this bracket, falling in the opener much to the dismay of the Classic Games Coalition and the 10 bracket believers that had it winning it all. Alongside him, one of the most controversial exits by far has to be by Spielet, who started to chip away at the Iceman's lead as the game continued, but was ultimately unable to secure the dub. People were furious at this development, on one instance calling for the match to be rerun on claims of biased voting. But here at the NBGA, we only accept the will of the people, and that unfortunately is sending by Spielet and its 11 bracket believers home early. Our final 2 early exits were the most selected winners from our first round eliminations, which surprisingly came from the number 12 seed Monogamy and the number 14 seed Book of Mormon Quest. These 2 titles both carried more supporters behind them than even higher seeded eliminations like Candyland, The Price is Right, and Mousetrap. to the tune of 12 and 15 brackets predicting them to win it all, respectively. Many of the monogamy hopefuls were likely dreamers desperately clinging on to the idea of the fated monogamy versus adultery matchup that we will unfortunately never get to see. But those who placed the Mormons as their champ are likely extremely let down by the frankly poor performance that they saw out there in the opener. We had our eyes on that match for a possible upset watch, and it just never even came close to happening. So I know that those poor souls are heading home distraught after putting their faith in the wrong faith. Overall, our opening round has left 105 people without a bracket champion, which sounds like a lot until you consider that 97% of brackets are still holding on to their designated champ. Most of the remaining group choosing to ally with the number 1 seed Breaky, which tops the board with 1,654 brackets, or a little over 40% of the entire pool. Other highly selected titles include the video board game Rap Rat in second with 601 possessed individuals backing him, and RPS commanding a force of 393 executives waiting for the money to pour in. So we'll have to wait and see whose faith will be rewarded and whose brackets will be left in the dirt.
Only time will tell, and looking forward, we still have 32 competitors that are aiming to work their way toward the title. The second round is about to begin, so check out how your bracket is doing and be ready to vote once more for your least favorite titles. Let us know below if your bracket is already busted, and which match outcomes had you jumping for joy or fuming with rage. Get ready for the second round as we get one step closer to finding the worst board game of all time. Signing off for the NBGA, I am KamSandwich. Thank you for watching and have a fantastic day.